Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously.
So they say that love is patient, love is
But
kind.
love is also filing an LLC paperwork at 2 a.m. in the morning and forgetting to eat lunch.
Exactly. It's romantic until someone forgets to respond to a Nordstrom buyer's email.
Or sells a house to keep the company afloat.
You know, the small things.
Which brings us to Charisse and Vicky Pasche, the powerhouse couple behind Dapper Boy, the all-gender, size-inclusive clothing brand shaking up the fashion industry one perfectly fitted jean at a time. They turned a honeymoon brainchild into a full-blown movement, proving that confidence starts with the clothing that fits you right.
From Shark Tank spotlights to selling their house to fund their dream, these two are redefining what it means to show up, show out as your authentic self. Welcome, Charisse and Vicky.
Wow, that was such an intro. Thank you guys. We're so everywhere with us.
Excited to see you again.
Yes. It's fabulous to be sitting down and having a conversation with you. Folks, we interviewed these two on our Queer Money podcast. So before we sit down and get into the whole Barbara Walters portion of this interview and we pull out our boxes of Kleenex, let's take folks back to the beginning. How was Dapper Boy born? What was the inspiration? What made you think that we can create this brand, this empire, Dapper Boy?
You know, selfishly, it actually started with my own personal journey, you know, shopping in the men's department, not made for curves. Once I became confident enough to shop in the men's department, which was a huge adjustment for me, it was actually a game changer for me and my confidence and how I felt. You know, then fast forward a couple years later, I meet love of my life here. And she's seeing me, you know, dressing in the men's department.
She's a hot mess. I was like, you wearing cute, stupid egg. I can't be having you as my arm candy. No.
Yeah, I mean, think about it though. Like the problem was when I was shopping, I'd have to wear my, you know, wear a button-up shirt and I'd wear it to like the center of my chest and leave the rest out like it was a style because I couldn't fit over my booty. And then I'd have to wear two sizes big again for the same problem. And you know, listening to this fashionista here, it was just so unflattering to be so boxy, you know, in men's clothing.
Yep. I tried to shop for her. It didn't work. And then fast forward, we get engaged, you know, we get married. And on our honeymoon, she pops another question to me. And she says, hey, I'm thinking about scrapping everything, all of my career, my work experience, everything. I think I want to start a brand, you know, selling clothes. Mind you, we both have zero fashion experience, haven't opened a business. We have very entrepreneurial spirits.
Yeah.
But, you know, when she had shared this with me, I was completely all in, and I've seen how it's changed her confidence through the roof, and we haven't looked back. One of the best decisions we've ever made.
Nice.
Isn't it so nice to be able to make decisions that make you feel confident and whole and really complement who you are? It's wonderful to be able to do that. But life may be a highway, but entrepreneurship is a roller coaster, right? It's not always easy. Tell us about some of your experiences with Dapper Boy. Its ups and downs, maybe some big decisions that you've had to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're, you know, coming on 10 years right now, actually, in being in business. So when we launched in 2015, it was on Kickstarter initially. And, you know, again, it was like the excitement, you know, the launch of the brand, and people were so engaged and excited. And, you know, we were soon selling out of products year after year, you know, bootstrapping this business. But it hasn't been easy in the least, you know, and hopefully we make it look that way. But, you know, on the back end here, it is a roller coaster. I wouldn't have it any other way, that's for sure. But there's so many lessons learned. I mean, the first lesson, again, like Charisse said, is we didn't have a fashion background, you know, and so trying to find a manufacturer to, you know, help us create this perfect pair of jeans that has no gender was a very interesting process. I mean, the amount of hangups that I had from people being like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And like, do you know what a minimum is? Like how many you need to order? And like, do you know anything about fabric and fashion? And I didn't. And it wasn't until one manufacturer was like, I think you're onto something. I'll hook you up with our pattern maker. And we were off to the races. So that was the first, you know, like, you know, initial challenge of just not knowing this industry. I'd say the second huge one was capital, like the amount of capital that you need to run a fashion brand, we completely underestimated. After that first Kickstarter launch, we had enough to raise, we were trying to raise 18,000 for our very first production. And we did 26,000, and we were like,
Nice.
yes, we have won. But, there's a lot more money that goes into just the production, like how are we going to stay alive and invest in other productions and marketing dollars and all the things that, goes with running a business. We had to learn very quickly. And so, yeah. And then after that, it's really, how do we keep capital coming in? How do we scale the brand? Our vision, and still is to be the next Levi's of all gender fashion. And you need a lot of capital to do that. So how are we going to, beyond our bootstrapping ways, raise capital, talk to investors, learn how to talk to investors? What kind of capital do you need, when you're scaling a company? And so there's, again, so many lessons learned. And, to the point, like you said in the very beginning, we ended up selling our home, during COVID was such a crazy time, when so many brands didn't make it. And we almost were one of those, because imagine we're doing these pre-orders still in that bootstrap kind of life, and not having inventory and not being able to even back the pre-orders that have come in, and we just trying to keep the lights on. And so, yeah, we had made that decision, but I just threw a lot at you.
No. I guess, oy vey, right? So selling, there are lots of people who we've heard of taken out a second mortgage on their homes to fund a business, but actually selling your house and downsizing to start your business, that's got to take a lot of emotion and risk. How did that feel?
Well, I will say, being a first generation Filipino American, it was always my parents' dreams, Vicky's parents' dreams, for us to be able to buy a home. And especially at that point, I think our girls were 2 years old at that point. So how proud were we to say that we were founders? We were able to create something for ourselves and our family. So actually, it's so funny. I share this a lot, but it actually, when it came time to sell our home, it was easier for me to come out to my family than to have the conversation saying that we needed to sell our home to sell the business. And to anybody
To invest.
to invest in the business, and to anybody outside looking in, they think that running a business is very easy. But what I will say is, I heard another founder say this on a panel: we may be selling our things, but we're not selling our dreams. And to have that much control, and once I wrapped my head around it and I said, yes, I'm all in, we need to do this, there's a couple reasons why, but we had that within our control. We were able to say, yes, in order for us to be able to go to investors and say, invest in us, you need to know that we're willing to invest in ourselves. So that was number one. And the number two thing is that always at the back of my head, Vicky's, I would say she's at the forefront. She's having the conversations with investors. On the back end, I do a lot of the operations, a lot of, customer support. I'm very customer facing. And to hear so many parents reaching out to us, what this brand means for their child, for other people that they know, their partners, we hear those customer stories. And if a brand like ours didn't exist because we couldn't make the decision to keep the brand going, that would eat me alive.
Yeah, I think we did a really crucial exercise because, emotionally, it was a really hard decision. It's such a
no doubt.
balance, personal and business. And so we did an exercise that I brought to our small group. And it was like a goal setting. That's what everyone thought it was going to be. Even though we were in a rough spot, we were still like thinking big. We said, okay, goals for 3 months from now, 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. Again, we're the next Levi's of all gender fashion. But the gut punch question was, where would the world be without Dapper Boy in 10 years? And that's where, the tears came in. And that's where it was like, this is a no-brainer, to sell our home because of all those stories that Charisse, was just talking about. This brand is so much bigger than us. And it just has the potential to change so many lives.
Wow. Yeah, that has to be a gut-wrenching decision to make, because I think for a lot of people, owning your own home is like the American dream. Then also having your business is an American dream. And like, which baby do I choose? It's like,
Right.
Sophie's choice.
Yeah.
Scary. So you've said before that you're plan A all the way kind of people. How has that mindset impacted your financial decisions, not just with your home, but your income, your saving, your risk taking? You're all in on everything, or do you have any aversion to any kind of risk at all?
We are plan A all the way because I really feel like if you even put a fraction of a percentage into plan B, you're not fully invested in plan A. Like you have to have all of your energy. And fortunately, Vicky and I work together so well. We're typically on the same page for all things business and life. If you're not on the same page, then you can't say that you're 100% focused on that linear dream. If you are not visualizing, manifesting where your end goal is, how can you get there if you're putting other energy elsewhere? I always say that my motto in our relationship and our life has always been say yes, ask questions later.
It's true. But I think that we've also been through enough. We were just talking about this literally today. When things don't go our way and this roller coaster, continues to exist. And I think all of these mistakes and obstacles that we have overcome has made us like so much stronger, where we don't really flinch as much anymore. We are very proud of how we have learned how to pivot quickly. Like this dream is plan A. And so no matter what obstacles come our way, because we have been through so much now at this point, there's no other way. It just will happen. And we really, truly believe it. We're all about manifestation on top of this all. And no matter what comes our way, we can pivot.
We're
quickly.
still smart business people because we're still basing our decisions on business data, where we have such a strong customer base. We have high repeat customer rate. I mean, we are trending much higher than what the average is for repeat customer rate. We built such a strong community, and that starts with being 100% vulnerable, sharing our story. And I think customers, when they come to our website, can see what this brand means to us personally as well. So I think that's why they buy in. They see how much love, time, and attention, and how this is also like our third child, like you were saying.
Yeah, it is beyond
Yeah.
emotions. We see it in our data. Again, 51% repeat customer rate is no small feat. In fashion
Nice.
brands like, try to strive for 28. And so the numbers show it. So that's it goes hand in hand. With the emotions, and the fundraising journey hasn't been an easy one by any
No.
means, but that's how we do connect with the investors that we have. It's been very emotional. They can see, the effect on our community, our customers, and, where we're going and how much we believe where we're going and the work that we're putting in.
Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages. All right, so welcome back, folks, to another episode of Living Not So Fabulously with Vicky and Charisse Pasche. We are so excited to continue this conversation with you. So we know a little bit about your backstory because we've already had the, conversations with you. You downsized from a 4-bedroom townhouse to a 630 square foot apartment while you had 2 kids. I mean, pull your hair out of your head, right? Did you feel embarrassed about that decision to tell people about that? Or what other kind of worries were you going through? These are the kinds of decisions that I think most people, they immediately close off because they don't want to talk about tell these kinds of things to their friends.
Yeah, so that was our first apartment before kids, that we downsized from a 4-bedroom to the
And just start
to start the brand. When we
Oh,
had
okay,
sold
gotcha.
the house. Yes. But we did have these twins during the chaos of all of this the business.
selling our house,
right.
move into a rental. And I think on social media, it looked like we were selling our house so that we can upgrade. And I remember, not everybody gets aired on Shark Tank. I remember getting our air date a few months later, and I looked at Vicky and I was like, oh my gosh, our very best friends, our family is all going to find out all of this news. the same time as America is. And that really freaked me out. And I had to have those tough conversations. But one thing that I have learned is since that journey, leaning into the vulnerable is so powerful because especially with social media, so many people want to paint the best 5 seconds of their lives and only show that. It's a very curated moments, whereas us leaning into our vulnerable story has really resonated so much with founders and also investors. Because the more that you can be vulnerable, you're going to impact somebody. You're going to be able to be honest about the wild ride that is entrepreneurship. And I think investors really like to also see that.
Yeah, I mean, we announced on Shark Tank, we were down to our last $100 in our bank account, and that was very true. And again, when we had that launch party of watching Shark Tank, our friends and family were like, I had no idea it was like that bad at that point because we always kept a smile on our faces. We were going through it, but again, we believed in the mission the whole time.
Yeah. I think when you have gone through the ups and downs, it makes when you are doing well so much more rewarding because you have worked hard for it.
Definitely. I think a lot of folks right now are having a lot of strained conversations, especially entrepreneurs, because of the current geopolitical and business environment. So I'm curious, are you having any impacts from the tariffs that we see happening right now? Or will your partnership that you announced recently with Nordstrom's, has that been affected?
Yeah, not in this moment, but we've been kind of preparing for this for a while now. And we've been, already making new manufacturing relationships with other folks, in other countries. We have, backup manufacturers here in the United States. And the reality is it's very, very expensive to produce in the United States. Our prices would be completely different at that point. So what's interesting is what we didn't realize too is when the recent tariffs were announced, such drastic tariffs, we weren't anticipating all of the countries that it was going to be affecting. And so, when we were making a pivot, for example, from a China manufacturer to India, we had talked to the India manufacturer and they said, okay, when are you been placing this PO? When do you expect it to arrive? And we said, our typical 60 to 90 days. And they're like, that's not realistic anymore because now all of these US huge corporations, they have now taken over our factories pretty much. And it's hard to get in these productions unless you're way in advance. And so that was a surprise to us that we weren't completely ready for. And so it's just now it's just, proper planning. And we still don't know exactly what with the pause on tariffs, what it's going to be. So we're anticipating what that could be. We're going to have to adjust our pricing. And also we're making some really big moves now internationally, as in now is the time. It's always been in the plan for us to expand internationally. We have customers already in the UK, Australia, and Canada. And so we are, going to be announcing very soon our big international expansion. And so utilizing fulfillment centers even in other countries. And so we've been really making a lot of strides again towards that pivot. And we're not going to let this scare us. We just, again, need to figure out what that pivot's going to be. We're working through that right now.
So for those who are just loving this tariff war and think that it's proving America's dominance on the global stage, as a small business owner who I'm assuming has some tight margins, and you just articulated that you've experienced roller coaster ride, what does it actually feel like to have this level of uncertainty when you have payroll to meet and you have lights to keep on and children to feed?
Yeah, it's scary for sure. It's scary. And I see so many other founders going through the same thing, even contemplating going out of business. That's devastating. Again, I think because of our, all that we've been through and our ability to pivot, that has helped us, as in mindset wise to keep going. And we are looking again at international expansion and what that could look like. And so this is by no means, throwing in the towel. It is a feeling of fear a little bit, but we will pivot and get through this. And I think coming together as a community is also essential, in getting through this together and sharing resources as well.
Yeah. Speaking of community, one of the questions that we love to ask at the very end of this show of all folks is, what's one piece of money advice, and maybe from your personal experience or your business experience, that you would share with the LGBT community, especially today?
Yeah, I think for me anyway, it's get out of your own way. I didn't come from money, and it can be sometimes intimidating to talk to investors, or maybe you don't know if you need capital yet, or, for your business. Have those conversations early and often. Be confident in who you are. Um, you know, Again, sometimes I kick myself for not having conversations with investors sooner in the game. But really, we're just
Mm.
all people, authentically connecting with one another.
Mhm.
And once you're able to kind of mentally get through that, like, don't be afraid to ask, for help, or ask questions, or just, financial education about
Mhm.
what you're doing. Like, that changed my confidence completely. And now we've raised, a bunch of money now. And it
Mhm.
is
Mm.
because of that confidence shift, again, of just getting out of my own way and getting out there. It's not about me. My business is about everybody else.
Yeah. It's your money mindset is where Vicky was going with that. Anytime you're running a business or asking for money, if you don't have the right mindset about it, a lot of us come into the biases that we grew up with as children. Being Filipino American, it came from a place of scarcity. It was like, hold on to what you have instead of investing in yourself. So I think that if you can create your own thought process and mindset and manifestation towards what you want money to do for you, that's where you're going to have that breakthrough moment so that you are not harboring those feelings and projecting that into your business.
Absolutely
that.
love that. Yes. Thank you, Vicky and Charisse. We really
Yeah.
appreciate you joining us. As far as takeaways from this, I think one of the ones that I love the most to hear is this idea of sometimes you have to take a step back to take two steps forward. I think that there's so many people in our community who would gasp at the idea of having to give up something that they already have so that they could get ahead a little bit further and maybe even help themselves financially a little bit further. So I love that you two were able to do that.
Yeah, I also love how you're able to be so nimble. I think so many of us, especially in this time, we're kind of maybe a little bit fatalistic, and we're not exactly sure that we're going to survive this. But your ability to be nimble sort of is an inspiration for the rest of us to figure out, we're going to be able to get through this. This too shall pass.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Thanks again for tuning in. If you like what you see, scan the QR code to follow Yahoo Finance Podcast for more videos and expert insights, because when you do, it keeps a pair of extra large cargo shorts from returning ever. And until next time, stay fabulous.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.